Hello.
Yes, sir. Wait for 1 minute. Sir, please start from the beginning. Anil, sir, please left from the meeting because you are presenting. So,
Hello.
yes, sir. Just 1 minute.
Since I'm not able to see you, you can always inform me about when to start and stop.
Yes, sir. Please start your session, sir.
Right. A bit of some processes in technology. We'll once again brief and start right from the beginning. I'll thank the organizers for inviting me for the delivery on a session on goal-directed online teaching and self-directed online learning. We'll be discussing on that for about an hour or so. After the 10 minutes, we have been just lapsed. We'll try to cover up the need and background so far as the topic is concerned. Try to have some kind of understanding of the present scenario under which we are operating and why there is a need for online teaching learning platform. We'll also work on understanding through some of the practices that we have been following, the concept of goal-directed online teaching and self-directed online learning. We'll also try to understand the nitty-gritty of the model of online learning through styles and structure relationship and try to align goals of the courses, sessions, etc. with that of the university. We'll try to have some kind of learnings, some kind of takeaways at the end of the session. In fact, post-COVID-19 effects, this is what we have been trying to face and trying to see almost everywhere across world. And look at the type of people that we have been working on. Previously, the people who participated in online courses or learning were of homogeneous order, mostly adult employed people who wanted to grow, place bound, goal oriented, and self motivated. The present scenario is slightly a different narrative. It is heterogeneous group, younger, dynamic, more responsive to rapid technological innovations. At extreme left side, you see three important bars. One mentioning about the online teaching, which is prevalent post-COVID-19 effects. There is something called blended learning. People would be motivated to work on this area. And I think traditional teaching would always take a back seat in years to come. Trying to develop an understanding through practices. If we can go back and try to search literature, and we would understand there is something called educational theory and working on online system. Very little research have been done on online teachers profile and learners profile. In fact, it's very difficult to work on some of the archetypical profile characteristics of what constitutes an online teacher or what constitutes an online learner. In fact, the theories about learning and online learning are available so far mostly derived from psychology. While psychology describes how people act, educational theory describes how people learn. And in fact, we need to work on these two elements, psychology and educational theory. And this gives us a lot of scope for design and implementation of online learning environment, trying to blend educational theory inputs and psychology of people, in fact, teacher as well as learner. Two things will emerge. One is goal directed online teaching, what constitutes this one, and what is self directed online learning. In fact, there is a need, so far as the basic concepts are concerned, to revisit, reread the educational theory based on the present circumstances or environment. One is behaviorism. And now, see, in behaviorism, We are working on a model called stimulus response theory. That means there is a goal for every learner, and the goal would eventually motivate a learner. Our online system platform must have this for every session. The second one, which is social cognitive theory, in traditional classroom and cognitive theory, this is where we are trying to work on. For example, we presently in traditional system are working for a concept where the student is responsible for the learning environment. Now that's basically a big question so far as need-based curricula is concerned. And what we must try to aim for is constructivism, learning process oriented, emphasizes collaboration and conversation. And this is possible, in fact, to an extent, if done so meticulously with some prerequisites in mind with respect to online teaching learning processes. Revisiting that, two things as I mentioned earlier, teachers' processes and the influence of teacher on students can be understood in great detail. For example, the philosophy of learning gives emphasis on the teacher, and understanding of educational theories plays a very important role so far as understanding of the role of a teacher is concerned. Try to understand the teacher, whether they influences students or not. Learning strategies, trying to understand what kind of strategies a teacher can employ to influence students, and utilize educational theories to construct meaningful learning experiences in an online classroom sessions. This is basically a challenging task so far as the attentiveness of a teacher student is concerned. In fact, we will try to work more on goal directed online teaching. In fact, the goal itself is forgotten, and we need to go into greater detail to understand what is the goal of education. In fact, employability is the goal of education, or happiness is the goal of education, or citizenship behavior is the goal of education. We will try to explore this in few minutes. Look at this model, supposed to be one model where everything is clearly explained, the effectiveness of online teaching learning processes. See, for example, this is not a circle. This is not something which is a phase ways. Identify yourself where you are in between with the traditional teaching environment and try to move ahead in the most appropriate block that probably you see would try to work on the need of a teacher or a student. More focused would be on the student. For example, let us understand that we are at the active stage of our process learning. And if we want to move from active to constructive stage, naturally, there are two important issues: computer mediated communication, which will play a very important role if you want to be slightly more constructive in an online teaching delivery processes. For example, attention is a question mark. How to make that happen? And effectiveness of our teaching processes, delivery. The teacher, in fact, take an example of what I am doing right now. Without not able to, I'm not able to see your faces, but still I'm able to trying to do my best. So these two areas must be worked upon. Go ahead and try to identify if you want to move from constructive to cooperative mode. There are two more important challenges that you need to work. One is methodology and pedagogy. Task based teaching, how we would be able to give it so far as online teaching is concerned, whether we'll be able to receive responses, the desired responses, the effectiveness of learning, and how group activity can be combined together. There are a lot of technological things that are available to make that happen. We need to be aware of that as well. Moving from cooperative to authentic, see, you have very important element when you are working on an online teaching learning platform is that almost all your materials must be so authentic. It has to have its own references, absolute clarity about that. You cannot just pick, drop something in between. It has to be worked upon based on the need of the topic, need of the learning model. So teaching, reading, audiovisuals, and case studies. In this internet age, almost everything is available and someone can put in almost anything anywhere. This must be taken care of so far as online teaching platform is concerned. Moving there, you have a very important learning lesson, which is we call it a goal-based theoretical approach. So far as your online system is concerned, you have to identify major goals, you have to identify minor goals. How are you going to evaluate on this model and identify the best method? I think many of you would have your eyes settled on a scale at the top of this slide, very clearly demarcating that there are two important facets of online teaching. One is a teacher, second one is a learner. In fact, the blurred things is technology. It is missing somewhere, but then you need to understand that that is the current that is passing through. And in between, there are many mediums, channels. You need to evaluate, work on evaluation strategies, the pedagogical tools that you need to employ. All must be taken care of if you want to make effective online teaching learning system success. I think the major terms that are being used here in goal directed online teaching is that there will be a reward mechanism, deadlines are set, and people work on the goals for every session, for every minute, for every task. It has to be so meticulously planned, worked out. In fact, for each session and activity that you try to prescribe in an online teaching learning method, you need to understand that we are working on three important elements according to Lee Purple study is knowledge, skills, and attitude. Irrespective of disciplines, this must be followed. For every session, for every topic, for every course, you need to understand what kind of knowledge sets are being catered to, what kind of skill enhancement practices or activities that can be part of the system at goal directed online teaching, and whether on a personality front it caters to attitude building and formation or changing as well. In fact, when you work from that more, you will eventually have almost entire things resolved so far as a teacher is concerned. That means academic planning for a teacher will be through once you understand almost every modules and phases so far as a program or a course is concerned. In fact, to have a clarity more so, if you have referred to the previous slide, you will understand now we are working on a flow. What would be the most ideal situation if you want to go into something like goal directed online teaching? Let's see, originally you have a university vision and mission, you have institute vision and mission. Now this must be aligned. I'll come up to that in a one or two I think 3 4 slides later on. And this must be integrated so far as course outcomes are concerned. Now when you talk about course outcomes, there are tools generally to make people learn. Something called synchronization, asynchronization tools. And right now, for example, this is basically a task-based methodology that we are trying to adapt to, and we are right now in an online mode in a discussion form. In fact, many of you will also have some kind of questions coming up once I complete the session. Program outcomes is basically techniques. You may have lecturing as one and handholding as another, guided facilitating the mode of learning is another. If you want to work on a teaching effectiveness, you need to identify holistic development of a student from personal, social, and professional front. This must be catered to when you are working on online mode. Materials and resources, as we mentioned earlier, must be authentic and tested with due processes in mind. In fact, one area which is very close to my heart is like all things come to a place called session plans, which we in our institute mention session wise schedule. And this must be so structured to leave little room for people to maneuver, but with all types of creative talents inbuilt and exercises inbuilt. Now, when I say this, you have to have almost every session identified with all tools, methodology, techniques, materials, resources, effectiveness in order to achieve the learning goal so far as the education system is concerned. That's where the movement, the connections in between. There's a matrix style of functioning that is happening. So if you have tools, you need to be effective teacher. If you have techniques, you can have a sessions plan, schedule, materials to be almost used everywhere. So it is so interconnected, so interconnected. So this is where goal-directed online teaching would be most effective if we try to adapt to these kind of principles. We'll be moving on to self-directed online learning. This is basically where the student is in control of the situation and almost everything depends on his or her motivation. Self-directed online learning can be guided or independent, as I mentioned. We need to formulate some kind of learning goals for each session so that the student, the participant to that program comprehends it. But in order to do and identify the needs or identify the goals for each session, we need to understand and identify and study the human needs. Now, this is basically so customized. When Professor Pallad mentioned n is equal to 1, that means every customer is a different customer, every student is also a different student. So when you mention this, you need to understand that identification of need becomes very important in self-directed online learning teaching platforms. Five main areas that we will be working on this is learning preferences of student matters, goals and motivations of participants and students matters, achievement motivations of students matters. They'll also be working on obstacles and challenges that they're going to face. When I mentioned about the present scenario, in fact, we did a research in this present context and we found out that about 56% of the students do not have laptops and they work on a very thin internet speed, which is difficult for people to even share screen. So in that case it becomes extremely difficult in a given scenario. So it's basically about obstacles and challenges that we'll be facing on with respect to mood swings as well. In fact, there's a lot of research on students mood preferences and changes that has also taken place. We can also take leverage from that studies. And then opportunities for life changes as well. This is where the guided factor of self-directed online learning would play a very important role. That means the role of a mentor, you need to have some kind of a window so far as your learning environment is concerned. This gives us a conceptual framework. Look at these three important model variables, cognitive, social, and teaching variables. For example, if we how to create this readiness in student depends upon the teacher. For example, we are working on a cognitive model. We need to understand what kind of tools, techniques, resources that can be placed when you're working on this model. For example, learning motivation, and this is where we are trying to create some kind of communities. It's become extremely difficult. For example, if you're working on an online mode, you need to have resources at abundance, technology dependence, and some kind of platform where people can work in different communities on a given task. In fact, team-based learning must be encouraged in self-directed online learning platforms. Should not be left open. And technology and use and mindset through positive attitude and teaching effectiveness can also be targeted based on self-directed online learning. This is where it is very difficult to comprehend, but once you put up your model curricula in place and try to offer some kind of a MOOC or NPTEL, we also understand that they are also working on these three important elements: cognitive, social, teaching platforms. In fact, those who would like to understand from rule-based processes, when you're working on, say, self-directed online learning, we must be trying to work on role-based interactions. See, the processes highlights very strict steps so far as online teaching methods are concerned. Whereas interactions are based on constructivism part of it, collaborative part of it. There are many things to go into, what kind of techniques that you can adopt, what kind of methods you can adopt, what kind of questions you can pose, what kind of assignments you can give. All things can form part of our design of self-directed online learning model. In fact, this is very important and near to my heart. Self-directed learning models, the present situation, in fact, even you would have been informed like to say switch on and switch off your mics at a given point of time. Here we are basically trying to transform information in the present era. And just imagine if we want to move from the present state to degree of collaboration with the learner and the teacher, it's going to be a very tough task because that has a lot of questions. The availability of infrastructure, trained teachers, acceptable or availability of people who are trying to be so close to technology and a situation of this order. In fact, imagine a situation from one stage, we are starting from a zero stage right now in India. We'll have to go to a mental model change almost for all the participants and stakeholders of the society. And if we want to go in for a learning team centric approach, this is going to be a very tough task. This is a matrix which we need to work on. In fact, the instructional methods and models are slightly different from that. So at one end, you see, I would try to go in for my own path, which I'm not sure of, and then there has to be some kind of a hand holding taking place through online mode where I feel comfortable and do my own task from a place where I choose almost all my options available. This is where we must aim for. I mentioned about understanding complexities of size and structure. And for you to understand, before I go into details of this three column and multiple rows, just imagine India has a huge population and a lot of people around of the same age group who will be interested to go in for learning mode. And remember, when size increases, it brings it with a lot of complexity. And complexity means if you want to penetrate, you'll have to leverage technology. When you leverage technology, definitely the structure would be influenced. And when you use technology, there'll be rules, regulations, standards, processes, formalizations. All these things will leave little room for creativity. And the essence of education, as I mentioned earlier, the goal of education, we need to identify whether it is employability, whether it is happiness, global citizenship behavior, or something that solves the nation's problem, something like creative, on a creative basis. So size, structure, relationships matter in online teaching learning platform. Just look at this pointer. There are dimensions given of various delivery modes, as we discussed earlier, and there are something called undesirable way of working out, which I think we are just here. In fact, even this many models of learning or teaching we are unaware of. And if you want to grow from this pedagogical basis model to the constructivism, as we mentioned earlier, it's a long rope. In fact, this is where we were trying to identify. This is where we are trying to work on. Just see learning theory model, which is behavioral here and cognitive here. And suppose if you go for delivery modes, which is fixed here, it has to be open in a constructive collaborative environment. This is very difficult. In fact, to achieve that, even people at the HBR are trying so hard to penetrate. Instruction models, instructor centered, which probably I am right now for about 40 minutes, 30 minutes of time, to a learning team centered approach. This is where the challenge lies in. So online delivery model, in fact, whether it is from teacher perspective or a student perspective, is a big issue here. Learning objectives, information transfer is what we are doing right now. And mental model change may happen, but how to evaluate that? This is where the challenge lies in understanding. In fact, this is one for all of you. We need to align the vision, mission, and quality policy of our university. You need to go back and reflect upon it very, very carefully to that of institute's vision, mission, and objectives. And if there are departments, so we need to work as well. Then we have to identify programs, objectives, course objectives, module objectives, unit objectives, topic objectives, and each session objectives. Imagine that your course is of 2 credits, 15 weeks of our first term, and you may have about 15 hours into 30-hour session. You need to have objectives for each session and each module, each topic, each course, each program. And that's how you have to align yourself, align yourself. Repeat, align yourself in this way, align yourself thoroughly for achieving the goals or objectives, and achieving graduate attributes. Now, this is a new term. I never mentioned that up till now. For example, what probably you're trying to identify? What should be my student at the end of the session? How should he be able to work on the skill set that I'm trying to prescribe to? Whether there's an enhancement or not, how do we judge? There has to be complete 360-degree views feedback mechanism system undertaken at every given point of time. And once you take up graduate attributes, it can be in domain specific area, it can be in presence of behavior. So we as an university must work across from top to bottom, right from the top people of the university to the session programmer, that is the teacher, to identify what is our goal so far as our teaching learning system, education system is concerned. I'll just try to share this graduate attribute, so to say. I hope you are able to see some. This set graduate attributes of CHARUSAT. We are working on an academic excellent model, knowledgeable across disciplines and interdisciplinary knowledge, how students would be at the end of the course program or once they get out of the university or so. Leaders in communities, they are supposed to be leaders in communities, attuned to cultural diversity. We are trying to aim through almost every session based planning. All courses are focused and centered around each or one or many of these graduate attributes, and personal, professional, and social element of it. In fact, this is where the alignment of achievement of objectives are identified with. I would be requesting, I think you are able to see a small piece of PPT where some traditional questions are being put forth. There is one QR code and there is a link to the questionnaire also given to you. You can just respond to this. I'll share that. In fact, how many people are participating, I'm unaware of, but then I was briefed earlier, around 300 or so. Let's see how many people respond instantly to the questions that I'm going to put forth. I hope I'll just give you about 10-15 seconds for you people to open up your mobile camera, QR code scanning, and click on, and you will be presented with about 7 questions. It's a statement, and you need to prefer and opine based on your understanding of the statement and level of importance that you attach to each of the variables. I hope you are getting it, and I'll move on to a live session. I think this is where mentee part. You can click on the website, you can click on the QR code. I must be able to receive some responses, and it's a live session here. I must get some responses. Yeah, waiting some more time. It gives you a very clear idea about traditional teaching is different from online teaching. The message was this: we need to understand online teaching is more of information transfer than collaborative learning. Goal directed teaching is developing students' understanding on phenomena. Teaching must be standardized for effective learning. The purpose of teaching is employability. Great, great. Self-directed online learning fosters creativity, and online teaching has potential to replace traditional university education system. There are seven sets of variables. In fact, the organizers can understand whether how many people were live and reading and referring and reflecting on. So there are three responses. If those who want to see Madam Shibani and Anil ji and all that, if you can see, there are four responses, and oh yeah, this will increase, I'm sure. Presently, there are eight responses, and the score says that the traditional teaching is different from online teaching. It's not so. I think not so. Online teaching is more of information transfer. Not so. Slightly higher up is the goal-directed teaching is developing student understanding on phenomena. Teaching must be standardized for effective learning. This is where creativity would be questioned. The purpose of teaching is employability. This is well taken. It is not the only objective. Self-directed online learning fosters creativity. This is good, but there's a question mark so far as online learning is concerned, but still very high numbers for that. And online teaching has potential to replace traditional university education system. I think well taken, well taken. But then still, there are some people to suggest yes, it may take place. That's great. I think 18 of them responded. This will go on. I'm requesting people to respond, and I'll just share with you the final result once things are there in order, so that people can get a final, very quick answer about that take on traditional versus online teaching. In fact, let this come through. Those who came late, 5 more seconds for them. You can reflect on that. In fact, I would like to conclude as I was given only about 30-40 minutes of time so that we can have some kind of interactions as well to take up some kind of questions from your side, if any. The way forward is whether it is goal-directed teaching and or self-directed learning, it must result in creativity, problem solving, innovation. And that's not my conclusion. In fact, your inputs has also been taken into consideration while concluding on this level. Thank you all, sir. And I'll be ready to take up questions one by one if somebody can host it and comfortably plan it.
Thank you, sir. We are giving a question in a few minutes, sir.
Please.
Okay, sir. Sir, we have sent some question in your WhatsApp.
Okay. Yet to receive any inputs. Waiting for. I have not received till the. Okay. Yes. Started receiving very quickly. I'll just share one or two. And there is one question that has been forwarded: is collaborative learning possible through online mode? In fact, yes, and that's why the session has been planned. It is possible if we have a blend of technology, we have a blend of systems. It is possible. And the only thing is that we need to work out systematically in identifying the right platform. In fact, there are n number of online platforms where separate groups can be created and people can interact again through live chat sessions, etc. In fact, one of the essence is where teacher and student create communities is blog, which is very traditional in nature. It is possible. It is possible. There's one more question. What should be the code of conduct for a teacher and a student during an online teaching learning process? If we go for a code of conduct, naturally, as I mentioned, there will be a lot of rigidities in place, but there has to be some kind of a training sessions organized for teacher. The do's and don'ts must be very clearly spelled out for at the both ends, whether teacher ends as well learners ends. I hope I have made some kind of inputs as well in that. I'll take one more. How can we practice goal directed teaching in practical oriented subjects? So there is one simple answer to this question. In fact, is there any task in this world which do not have or doesn't have any goal, any objective? And if it is so, get rid of that task very clearly. Get rid of that task very clearly. One need not have that kind of a model or a course where there is absolutely no objective. Any course for that matter, practical course, theoretical course, in fact all courses has to be some kind of practice involved in it. So in fact differentiating, in my opinion, differentiating a course in two aspects, practical and theoretical, itself is a misnomer. In fact, it has to be a contact based teaching learning platform model. How do you differentiate that in an online mode delivery, a practical or a theoretical one? I think it's that's where we need to change our mental makeup. uh, how online we be able to maintain the students' interest. So this is where I tried my best. We are very new to this field, but then see, I'll just give you one answer through this. There are about 63 responses right now and still increasing. Naturally, trying to win interest is where we need to have some kind of application of mind processes wherein students are motivated and feel themselves in control of situations. Learning while teaching and teaching while learning, both pairs go simultaneously. Absolutely, yes. Teachers need to be advanced, at least smarter than students. I agree. But besides all that, major issue is infrastructure. What would say on that? I mentioned that infrastructure is a big issue, and almost all stakeholders, naturally from top to bottom, will have to work on this element. In fact, government of India is also trying. World is also taking note of that. We will be having a lot of online platforms in coming years as well, online courses. But for present day situation, traditional systems of education university, it's a big challenge how to penetrate deep inside this system of technology. It's a great challenge. In fact, infrastructure is a big issue. And in developing countries like India, imagine a situation where we are working for almost all technological developments of the world. We are actually trying to give a lot of brain to this other world as well, but then we do not have one at process. I do agree, sir. We control the do's and don'ts. Technology would try to always bring in rigidity in the system, and we need to have some kind of flexible system in place. We need to have this the connected platform. In fact, there are a lot of we will be working on some kind of a dashboard model where almost every other technology or systems are connected in that mode, and we'll be able to leverage the benefits of one and all there. And that's where I think we'll be able to identify the do's and don'ts. But trying to go too much inside the do's and don'ts in an online platform will always invite, say, lack of interest so far as the students are concerned. And if there is no two-way communication, which is the essence of university education, things will not be happening. It is it's a dangerous situation, in fact. For example, I put up one question: self-directed online learning fosters creativity, and I'm still getting 4.1. Now, see, imagine a situation if you are left alone and without being guided. Where is the concept of mentoring? Years back, the concept of mentoring was introduced. So you need to have that model of mentoring blended in your online teaching methodology. Can the thinking ability being developed by a student learning online? Absolutely, yes. I think there is no doubt about that. I was made to think a lot how to talk to a group of learned teachers as well. There's one more question directly put forth. What are the challenges you find in online teaching learning methodologies? In fact, the way that we are seeing webinars being hosted and people just get out of it and all that, it's a great challenge. It boils down to a model that I mentioned, that it is more of a student's interest centric than probably trying to force someone out of it. How can we practice goal directed teaching in practical oriented? Yes, I answered that. In fact, majority of students are coming from remote place, then we would rate success of online teaching and learning. It is not successful presently so far as our system is concerned. In fact, if it had been successful, distance learning education mode, even establishing centers at remote places would have been great success. Go to a model where physical places are there like PHCs and CSCs in healthcare system, but still it is not of great success. So when we are working on an online mode, when there is lack of technological developments happening or accessibility is a question, it is not of that great success. In fact, many things would be repeated. In fact, we have a model at my institute where every course would be followed with the 3 online courses the student has to undergo, whether it is free or paid. And I think what we found out in one such batch is like about 70% of the student replicated the entire PDF versions. Only one student did the full course, and others they just modified the course. So everything is possible in online. So under these circumstances, I would be highlighting it. The evaluation or the mental models would be based on originality of the content and not on the traditional forms of say established norms of examinations, etc. It has to be based on originality of content and not something like you write an exam and then memorize and all that. It has to be based on rubrics where originalities are stressed, where applications are challenged, and people are made to work out and go in field and work it out. As simple as that. It has to be in a different mode of learning, facilitative mode. One more question: learning while teaching. I think I answered that. Infrastructure is a big issue. If any more questions, I think I'll be happy to take it up. Are there any more questions? Just to give you an answer, there are about 70 participants who have responded to, and very, very beautifully, the purpose of teaching is employability has been rated as the lowest, 2.9 out of 5 point in a 5-point scale. The mean score is 2.9, which essentially means that we may not be able to take responsibility for our actions. Education must take responsibility. It has to be outcome based education. Imagine a situation where our students are not employable, what would happen? And this is exactly where I wanted to bring out the raw facts. This is where we work on present education system. We try to teach. We are basically an information dissemination provider. We don't want to create people who can contribute to society.